Geek Therapy Radio.
Although you done me wrong, so lonely I'll be. Thrill is gone. Thrill is gone away for good. Thrill is gone. Thrill is gone away for good. Although I hate to see you leave, I move on just like I should.
Welcome to Geek Therapy Radio. I am your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger, of course. I hope you're having a good day, a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're listening to Geek Therapy Radio podcast today. As I think of it right off the bat, I haven't mentioned this before, but I just had to fire up my audio recording software, obviously, to record this podcast here, because tonight I am recording it at home. It is about 12:45, so this is a late one. But I fired up my audio software, and I really don't like the new layout of Steam. I'm sorry. I don't know if I've mentioned that yet before, but the new Steam interface, I don't see why anything was wrong with the old interface. It's just, maybe it's just going to take a while to get used to. If you're familiar with Steam, either on PC or Apple or whatever you're using, let me know. Email me if you want, or just get at me on Facebook. Even on Twitter. Twitter's actually really, really good to talk to my fans. Listeners, interact with listeners. Twitter's a really good tool for that, even though Twitter on the whole is a cesspool. But as far as interacting with your audience, it is great. So Geek Therapy Radio on Twitter, I think it's technically at Geek Therapy KPRC. But I'm sure if you just search for Geek Therapy Radio on Twitter, you'll find it. And just let me know what you think about the new Steam interface. I hesitate to call it new at this point because it's been out for probably a few weeks at this point. But not a big fan, Steam, or Valve, I should say. Not a big fan. Maybe there's a way to roll back and go to the old interface. Maybe this is just a beta trial. I haven't really looked into it that much yet, because really Steam is just a launcher that I use to launch any games or programs that I use, and I never really paid too much attention to it. I know how to use it. I know where things are that I need to use, and that was pretty much that. It didn't get in the way. Now the new interface is not great in my opinion. Maybe you like it. Let me know if you like it. There's nothing wrong if you like it. I wish I liked it, but I don't. So anyways, this podcast, I wanted to talk about a couple things, but one thing specifically, and I just need to come clean because as of right now, it's nothing huge, but as of right now, I've got a video uploading to my YouTube channel where I state my case for all of this, where I make my case for all of this, but I'm just going to be real honest. The 16-inch MacBook Pro, I want it. I want it unironically. I actually want the 16-inch MacBook Pro. This is the first MacBook Pro I have ever genuinely wanted. And I will explain myself. I might do a way better job, more succinct job in the video. It's about 10 minutes long, but I'll just say right now something that I didn't mention in the video, but I'll mention right now to my podcast listeners. I don't have any plans to, even if I got the MacBook Pro 16-inch, because let it be known, it still costs a ton of money, and I just don't know where I would pull $2,400 for the base model, $2,400 out of. Don't know where that would ever come from, unless I get some sort of windfall or things get really great at work or with a show or something like that. I just don't know where the money's going to come from. If anyone wants to give me a MacBook Pro 16-inch, that would be great. But yeah, so wanting the 16-inch MacBook Pro and actually being able to procure one are vastly different things. But even if I do have a MacBook Pro, here's what I'm saying. I would not abandon PC. I still have well over a dozen Windows-based computers and Android tablets. My phone is Android. But anyway, I'm not going to get rid of PC. It's not like I'm going to get the MacBook Pro 16 if I ever do and just stop using PC. I would heavily utilize software within the Mac ecosystem. I would probably get more into Pro Tools. I have been certified in Pro Tools. Once upon a time, when I went to recording school, I had a Pro Tools certification. Pro Tools is not proprietary software to Apple at all, to Mac at all, but it runs production software. There's no beating around the bush. Audio production software, video production software tends to be more stable on a Mac. Tends to. That doesn't mean that Mac is perfect. I have crashed programs on a Mac. Macs do get viruses from time to time, not as much as Windows PCs, but that's just simple economics. If you're a hacker writing a virus and 90% of the population owns PC versus 10% or whatever it is that owns a Mac, why would you write a virus that will hit the lowest, the least amount of computers? You're going to write the virus for Windows because most people use Windows. Most businesses still use Windows, so you're going to write viruses for Windows. It's just this idea that Mac is more impervious to viruses, that it's not really true. It's just that they're not writing as many viruses for Mac as they write for Windows, because people who write viruses want to do the most amount of damage. And Mac doesn't have nearly the market share that Windows has. But anyways, Pro Tools, back to Pro Tools. Pro Tools was originally written for Mac. In fact, for many, many years, Pro Tools was exclusive to Apple. The only way you could get the software, the only platform you could run Pro Tools software on was a Macintosh, was a Mac computer. So an iMac, the old MacBooks, MacBook Pros, not MacBook Air at that time. Was MacBook Pro even out at that time? Didn't matter. You needed an Apple of some sort for Pro Tools to work with. So I have a feeling that if I got a MacBook Pro 16, I would get back into the groove of Pro Tools. I'm starting to learn DaVinci Resolve because while I do know Sony Vegas better than anything else, and that I was talking to a listener recently about why he was asking me why it is that a lot of audio guys, and by my nature, I'm an audio guy, why a lot of audio guys use or prefer Sony Vegas. And it's very simple. Way back in the day, a lot of us cut our teeth in audio with Acid Music 1.0. It was Sonic Foundry Acid Music 1.0. Then Sony bought it. I don't know who owns Acid Music now, if Acid Music is even still a program that gets regular updates. I haven't checked on it. But the fact remains that Sony bought Acid Music from Sonic Foundry. So Acid Music, in all of its iterations, Sony Vegas, the video editor, looks very much like Acid Music. So we have a built-in familiarity with it as audio people. That was the first program that really kind of used loops and made kind of easy music creation accessible to the masses. So Sony Vegas looks like Acid Music. A lot of us audio guys got our start, and music guys and gals got our start with Acid Music. So it's just a familiar interface to us. That being said, I've been opening DaVinci Resolve more and more recently, almost in anticipation for using software, video editing software that's cross-platform. If I ever do get a Mac, I would want to be fairly familiarized with DaVinci Resolve so that I can use DaVinci Resolve or Pro Tools on either Mac or PC. That's, I think, for a lot of people, and it makes total sense, that the transition from Mac to PC and PC to Mac isn't just a financial one. The fact remains that there's a lot of programs that only run on PC, and there's a lot of programs that only run on Mac. So if you want Final Cut, if you are proficient at Final Cut and you don't know Adobe Premiere, for instance, for video editing, Final Cut is not on PC. So you'd have to learn from scratch Premiere, Adobe Premiere. Unless you choose to use audio production and video production software that's cross-platform, and that's my plan. Get familiarized with DaVinci Resolve. Just dust the cobwebs off of Pro Tools so that I can use the same software on both platforms, because I know that if I go to Mac as a daily driver for my laptop, at least, then I can't use Sony Vegas. Sony Vegas is not on Mac. Neither is my go-to audio software, which is Cakewalk Sonar. I know Cakewalk Sonar like the back of my hand. It is by far the most familiar audio software to me. I am very comfortable in Pro Tools, but I'm even more comfortable in Cakewalk Sonar. It's just the software that I prefer. And that's because I got started with Cakewalk Sonar. It was Cakewalk Home Studio, Cakewalk Music Creator, whatever you want to call it, the cheaper versions of it. I got started with it 2003, 2002, because it was way cheaper than Pro Tools. And back then, 2002, 2003, Pro Tools wouldn't run on a PC anyways. So while I was going to sound school and using Pro Tools day in and day out, when I came home to my crappy little Celeron PC, Windows PC, I was using Cakewalk Home Studio. So I was using both software, and I wound up sticking with Cakewalk Sonar just because Pro Tools was prohibitively expensive. I did eventually buy Pro Tools when it came to PC, a few years after it came to PC actually, but you still needed to have specific audio interface, M audio. So I had Pro Tools M powered. So Pro Tools M audio powered. So the last version of Pro Tools I bought with my own money, it's like $300 or $400 back in the day, 2006, 2007, was Pro Tools 7.4. Don't even know what Pro Tools is up to right now. 10, 11, 12, do they even call it version whatever anymore? I do have Pro Tools, the free version of Pro Tools on my laptop just to stay fresh with it. But I have a feeling that if I did actually get a MacBook Pro 16, that I would get more versed in Pro Tools so that I could keep these podcasts coming to you. Use DaVinci Resolve for my video editing. But the point is, I do actually want a MacBook Pro 16. And now, yes, almost 13 minutes into the podcast here, whatever, I'll tell you why that is. I don't know where you're coming from, where you're listening, because this is usually kind of a very divisive issue. I just wanted to reiterate that even if I got a MacBook Pro 16, I would not just abandon PC for the reasons mentioned earlier. I have several PC computers. I still heavily rely on PC, but the fact remains I want a MacBook Pro. So here's why I want a 16-inch MacBook Pro. It's really that Apple, I feel, has finally turned a new leaf. Really, that's what it amounts to. There were at least three main areas of complaint with the previous versions of the MacBook Pro. So the outgoing 15-inch MacBook Pro, we all remember 2018 and Throttlegate. That was one of the main issues, is that even despite Throttlegate, that the processors, CPU and GPU throttle heavily, even in the best 15-inch MacBook Pro, because they make the MacBook Pros so incredibly thin that it gives the middle finger to physics. The processors in these things could not be fully utilized. They were limited and crippled by the chassis that they were put into, because the chassis was so thin that it could not possibly have enough of a cooling solution to handle the heat thrown off by these high-powered processors. That was a huge turnoff, because let's get one thing straight. When you buy a MacBook Pro, you're paying the Apple tax. The 16-inch MacBook Pro still starts at the same base price as the outgoing 15-inch model at $2,400. So even to get in the door, you're spending an exorbitant amount of money for the privilege of owning an Apple. And for what did you get for that? A crippled design. So the first main area of contention was the MacBook Pro's thermal design. It was crap. It crippled the internals, crippled them. The second thing, as we all know, was the butterfly keyboard. They kept pushing this mechanism. New and improved butterfly keyboard. Oh, now this one's new and improved. Oh, this one's improved now. They were all crap. All of them were crap. Not every single device. I mean, there's probably people who have a MacBook Pro from, I think, when was the butterfly introduced? 2016, around there. Shortly after the unibody design, or thereabouts. So there can be people that have never had a problem with their butterfly switches. Maybe they've kept their MacBook Pros in pristine environments, what have you. But the fact remains is there was enough of a problem with the butterfly switches that Apple had to extend the repair program for those affected models with butterfly keyboards. A lot of people, there were enough problems with the butterfly keyboards that Apple had to directly address the problem. They were losing money because the butterfly keyboards were crap. They weren't losing a ton of money, but it was still a hemorrhaging happening at Apple. So the MacBook Pro 16, that's the second issue addressed. They go back to an older design of the keyboard called the Magic Keyboard that uses traditional scissor switches rather than the butterfly switches. So the keyboards now not only are more reliable, and really, honestly, time will tell there, but they use the Magic Keyboard, and that's the keyboard that comes with iMacs, for instance, and iMac Pros. It's a tried and true design that works, that are very reliable. So they put that design back into the MacBook Pro 16-inch. So every indication is that these are going to be way more reliable than the butterfly keyboards. But if we're honest with ourselves, only time will tell. So the point is that the thermals, Apple has addressed them. The butterfly keyboard, Apple has addressed it. The next thing is the touch bar. People complained about the touch bar, and I will concede that the touch bar really amounts to a personal issue. Either you fell into three camps. Either you love the touch bar, The middle camp, where I think most people sit, is that they could care less about the touch bar either way. It doesn't really matter. They're going to buy an Apple. They're going to buy a Mac, whatever. I don't care if it has a touch bar. Just give it to me. Then there's another camp of they despised the touch bar. They hated the touch bar. And there was insult to injury in that the touch bar eliminated not only the function keys, but eliminated a physical escape key. And I don't know if you know this or not, but a physical escape key is pretty critical to a lot of people, especially coders. They need that escape key. So it doesn't help even just to the general user when the digital escape key displayed on the touch bar would freeze. So you couldn't escape. You couldn't use the escape key. That's a critical key in computing, whether it's Windows or Mac, the escape key. And it would freeze. It was part of the touch bar, which is basically just another little tiny touch screen. You couldn't use it. The bar would freeze, whatever would freeze. It would not register the input. Kind of important for an escape key. You got to register the input. So Apple addressed that issue too. They have made the touch bar a little bit smaller on the left and right. On the right side, you have the Touch ID, the fingerprint scanner sensor. On the left side, you have a physical escape key. I should have mentioned with the butterfly keyboard also, or the new keyboard, Magic Keyboard, that you have a little more key travel. So it should be more comfortable for more people, depending on who you are. I never really thought that the old butterfly keyboard felt that terrible. I would have preferred more key travel, but it was never a big deal to me. But I do prefer more key travel, so that should help a lot of people, at least with comfort in typing long things. But back to the touch bar, they added the escape key, a physical escape key, a physical clicky button actuator escape key. So let me go back to thermals for a second. Let me tell you how they addressed that. Apple added 0.7 of a millimeter in thickness. For longtime listeners of Geek Therapy Radio, you know that I fell firmly in the camp of I wish Apple would just realize that people don't care about a millimeter or two of thickness if it means they can get the most out of the processor that they're paying for, the most out of the equipment that they're paying for, that extra millimeter or so will be unnoticed. It's still going to be a thin device, but if you add another millimeter or two, you get better cooling and you get better battery life. Apple did that with the MacBook Pro 16-inch, which, by the way, the MacBook Pro 16-inch is a true 16-inch diagonal screen. The 15-inch MacBook Pro, outgoing MacBook Pro, was 15.4 inches. So really, the 16-inch MacBook Pro is about a little bit over half an inch bigger. The dimensions of it are extremely similar to the 15-inch MacBook Pro, however. Extremely similar. So much that if you picked it up in your hands just with no reference, you would think that they were both the same size. It was only that when you put both together and you really start feeling and looking that you notice, oh, the MacBook Pro 16 is ever so slightly larger than the MacBook Pro 15. It's even been said that the MacBook Pro 16 will fit in most MacBook Pro 15 cases, existing 15 cases. Your mileage may vary, but at its absolute widest, most wider than the 15-inch, it's about 1/4 of an inch, maybe that. So it's very similar in size to the outgoing 15-inch MacBook Pro. But the most important thing is that thickness, that 0.7 of a millimeter of thickness. Apple has added 35% more heatsink area. So more fins in the exhaust, more heatsink area actually touching the CPU and GPU, and the fans move 28% more air. So you're moving 28% more air over 35% more surface area for the heatsink. That results in up to 12 watts of increased headroom, TDP headroom, 12 watts. These processors, the H-series processors, the i7 and i9, they're around 45 watts. So 12 watts is a lot of headroom for heat dissipation over the outgoing model. And by all reports, it's not uncommon. About the average is getting 250 to 300 more megahertz out of the processor, and it does not go below base clock. In fact, by all accounts, it cruises at around 3 to 3.1, 3.2 gigahertz under full sustained load across all cores, versus the outgoing model, which hovered around 2.5-ish, 2.6 at best. Basically around base clock. So there are major improvements to the MacBook Pro 16, but the biggest reason why I want one isn't because of all those improvements. It's what those improvements, which are very small improvements, by the way, it's what they represent. That Apple it's that Apple listened to customers for the first time in I can't even remember how long. Apple officially addressed and acknowledged that there were problems with the MacBook Pro, listened to customer complaints, and gave the customers what they wanted. This is coming from the company that not too long ago told us we were holding the iPhone 4 wrong. That's why the iPhone 4 got poor reception. Steve Jobs himself said this is a non-issue, just hold the phone differently. That's Apple. That was typically the attitude that Apple had is, our products are perfect. You are not using them correctly. There were even a lot of Apple apologists. After in 2018, the MacBook Pro Throttlegate, they went onto YouTube and wherever making videos saying, guys, you're going to get way more performance out of your 2018 MacBook Pro i9 if you would just use Final Cut, which is Apple proprietary software. If you just use Final Cut Pro to make videos rather than Adobe Premiere. Adobe Premiere isn't as optimized as Final Cut Pro. Basically blaming the end user and blaming the software for poor results. No, that wasn't the case. It's not the user's fault. It's not the software's fault. It doesn't matter what software you use. You want to get the full performance out of the CPU and GPU. And the fact remains that in the 15-inch MacBook Pros, they could not dissipate the heat, so they could not run as fast. It wasn't that that Final Cut was better than Premiere or vice versa. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you're throwing at it. Even if it's a synthetic test, 100% CPU load, you should not be bogging down to below base clock. That was the issue. And to blame the end user or blame the software, ridiculous. In the video that I have uploading to YouTube right now, I equated that to saying it would be like, so when Steve Jobs said just hold the iPhone 4 differently and the problem will be fine. Could you imagine, bear in mind, Apples are premium devices. Could you imagine if you bought a Mercedes, a brand new Mercedes, and you drove it out on the road and it pulls sharply to the left? You're fighting the car constantly to keep it in the lane because it's just pulling to the left. And when you talk to Mercedes about it, Mercedes would say, well, just hold the wheel harder to the right to compensate. Our product is fine. You need to adapt the way you use it. No way. That would be unheard of. Yet that is that is how Apple operated for a long time. Our products are great. You, the unwashed masses, are just using them wrong. And then you had Apple apologists saying, well, the MacBook Pro is throttling because you're not using the right software with it. Bull crap. I just paid up to $6,000 for a laptop. I want to run whatever damn software I well please. And it better run smoothly and quickly and not throttle below base clock. That was the issue. And I never thought, in terms of being an Apple apologist, I never thought that did anyone any good, especially existing Apple customers. If you keep apologizing for the company, then you're just going to keep getting crap products. And that's one reason I thought we got so many crap MacBook Pros, is because you had so many apologists sucking on the teat of Apple saying, oh, this is fine. Thank you, sir. May I have another? Oh, this is great. No. Be critical of Apple where they deserve to be critical. Be critical of any company where they deserve the criticism. As I mentioned also in the video, I have not bought any sort of recent Microsoft Surface device because I refuse to. Because they don't give us a Thunderbolt 3 port, which everybody else has. The MacBook Pro, by the way, even the worst MacBook Pros, Throttlegate MacBook Pros have 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports. or up to 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports. Microsoft itself, who makes Windows, who makes PCs, didn't have a Thunderbolt 3 port, still doesn't have a Thunderbolt 3 port on its Surface Pro 7. Instead, they use that PCI Express bandwidth for their own proprietary connector. You catch me? They want to screw you into buying their own proprietary accessories to hook onto the proprietary connector instead of giving us the industry standard Thunderbolt 3 connection to let us choose what we want to hook up to it. So you're not hooking up external graphics cards. You're not hooking up external high throughput, high power output hubs to the Microsoft Surface Pro 7. So they're not getting my money either. And they deserve criticism for that. Apple has deserved criticism. Why I want the MacBook Pro 16 is because Apple finally appears to at least pretend to care. And it sounds like somebody in the MacBook Pro department actually did care. They said, you know what? Enough is freaking enough. We have put out this crappy product for the past several years. We need to put in the tried and true keyboard that works. We need to increase our thermal design to handle these chips. And we need to listen to people when they say they want a physical escape key. So they gave a physical escape key. There's a changing of the guard at Apple, obviously. That's worth rewarding. So I will at least now consider, if I ever have the money or I'm ever in the position to get one, MacBook Pro for the first time ever in my life is on the table officially now. That means that next time I'm looking to spend some serious dough on a laptop, the last laptop I bought, I probably have $2,000 into it. And it's 2016? When did I get that thing? It's an MSI GS43 VR. Core i7, GTX 1060. It's a 64 gigs of RAM, 2 terabytes of NVMe solid state. It's a really good laptop. So from time to time, I'm willing to spend money on a daily driver laptop because I use the laptop 95% of the time. The other 5% of the time, I use my desktop PC. That's just the way it works out for my life. So I'm willing to spend a good chunk of change on a laptop because I'm going to use it every day, day in, day out. And where in the past I would not consider Apple, not just for the bang for the buck aspect of it, but because I felt that Apple was just continually insulting the customer, just giving us poor design or offering poor design, not giving me, because I never bought into it because I just thought the design was poor. And I'm not, if you're already spending a premium for their products, they better work flawlessly. You better get every ounce of what you're paying for. And I just felt like you weren't going to get that with Apple for several years. If you like Apple, if you have stuck by Apple's side as far as your laptop is concerned, your MacBook Pro is concerned for the past several years, more power to you. You know what? To each their own. I'm just saying personally, I didn't like the way they were operating and I didn't want to reward it. Now, next time I upgrade my laptop, and it's been a few years and it's coming up soon that I will do so, MacBook Pros are back on the table. MacBook Pros are on the table for me for the first time. Because Apple has started to listen to the customer, address inadequacies, and make the necessary changes. That's huge, and that's deserving of being rewarded with your hard-earned dollar if you want a MacBook Pro specifically. Rest in peace, MacBook. Go to Apple's website and no more MacBooks. Will we get a MacBook Pro 14-inch? That would be awesome. MacBook Pro 14-inch with a dedicated GPU. That would be awesome. Doesn't even have to be the most powerful GPU in the world. Just give us a dedicated AMD GPU in there. 6-core MacBook Pro 14-inch. AMD 5300M, maybe? we'll see. We'll see what happens with the 14-inch MacBook Pro. So that's going to be about it. That's really it for today. I spent a long time ranting about the MacBook Pro 16. So the takeaway is that, like I mentioned, I am in the market, and if it's back in contention. If I were to buy a new laptop tomorrow, I would look heavily at the MacBook Pro 16 now. For the first time in years. And that is huge. That is huge. I have not pulled any punches on Apple. And I'm thankful that I didn't pull any punches. I'm thankful that a lot of consumers didn't pull any punches on Apple, because that's why they gave the new keyboard, the new touch bar, and the new thermal design. Because we wouldn't let Apple get away with it. Versus being an Apple apologist and then blaming consumers that were using their product wrong. You set Apple back a good 4 years by apologizing and kissing Apple's butt. Kissing Apple's butt. That didn't help anything. Your lips are stinky. So, yeah, I think the MacBook Pro 16 is really cool. First MacBook Pro I want ever. That's going to do it for Geek Therapy Radio today. Be good to yourselves and others. Embrace your inner geek. Know that you are worthy of love. The music that's playing right now, I will, of course, leave a link to the artist, to the song in the description of the podcast. And other than that, take care. Have a wonderful day. And I'll see you tomorrow.
I'm free now. Said I'm free for your spell. Said I'm free now. Said I'm free for your spell. After it's all over, baby, all I can do is wish you well.
Geek Therapy Radio, Saturday night at 10 on KPRC 950. Or listen anytime on our iHeartRadio app.